The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? Beef, butter, bacon, eggs, eat fatty meat. Sounds great! The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. Just give it a shot and you'll be carnivore next.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Carnivortex, episode 3. And I am NoCarbBarb, and I, along with the HighFatCats, who are my managers, editors, and producers, are extremely excited to bring you our guest today, who is none other than Dave Mack. I am so honored to have him here. He has done well over 1,000 interviews, and I am just so honored that he would be willing to come on here. So, Dave, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me on, Barb.
Yeah, well, okay. I thought about this and I was like, no, there's no way that I can come up with any accent that would be anywhere close to how beautiful your voice is or anything. But I do want to ask you, you ask everybody, how did you find carnivore? Well, I'm going to ask you, how did carnivore find you?
Well, Carnivore found me just over 3 years ago now, and it was as a result of having a drinking problem and having pre-diabetes. So I had been eating pretty badly for a long time and also drinking a lot. And I think a lot of that was convenience, but a lot of it was also, kind of, I don't know, self-soothing or that kind of thing. Um, and I went to my doctor one day in June 2022, and he said, "You've got an alcohol problem and you have pre-diabetes. We need to deal with these." And the first thing he wanted to do was deal with the alcohol. And he wanted to put me on a drug which has some pretty bad side effects, one of which is death. And I wasn't too crazy. I'm not too crazy about medications at any time, so, but most especially when side effects are death. So I asked him to help me. Sorry, I asked him to give me some time to see if I could sort this out myself. And having the doctor mention stuff to you that you kind of already knew was a bit of a wake-up call. And so I decided I was going to go keto and try and get back a little bit of self-control. Because over the years or over the decades, every time I've tried to do low carb or keto, it's given me a bit of self-control. And so I did that and I was able to stop the drinking and obviously stop the junk food because I was on keto now. I was avoiding the keto snacks. And the thing was, though, keto actually turned into carnivore by accident. And what happened is when I went keto, I realized that plants were actually trying to kill me. And what would happen is soon after eating, I would find myself in the bathroom. And at first I thought, okay, this is something to do with the meat. But I also thought it was weird because I'd never experienced it before. So I started to do a little bit of research and happened on some videos by Ken Berry. And those videos were saying, well, actually, plants are not necessarily that good for you. And he was singling out some of the vegetables that I was eating because I thought those were, ones I should eat because they were high in vitamin C. And, of course, I needed those things. And my goal this time was not weight loss or anything like that. My goal was to get healthy, get off the alcohol, that kind of thing. So I'd been diligently eating veggies, which in previous attempts at keto, I hadn't necessarily done. And so he singled out these veggies that were gut irritants. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe maybe this is the problem. And I wasn't married to the vegetables. I was only eating them because I thought I had to. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try and give them up and see what happens. Stopped the veggies, and of course, the bathroom issues stopped. And at the same time, because I've watched these videos from Ken Berry, all these other carnivore videos started coming into my feed on YouTube. And I just thought, well, there's lots of people doing this. I'm just going to keep going. And that's how I got here.
That's so interesting. So you have on the one hand, the solution is a medication that could
Mm,
potentially kill you. And on the other hand, you're doing everything you can and using the diet solution that is recommended by all the experts, and it's trying to kill you. So
right.
you've been very resilient in your attempts to avoid death in all of this.
Right.
Yeah, so did you ever see yourself when all those podcasts and videos came into your feed, did you ever imagine that you would be talking to people online about carnivore?
No, not at all. I remember when I first got started, um, I was maybe I was 2 months, 3 months in. I just had a physical, and they check your blood and whatever, and my cholesterol was a little bit elevated, or my LDL was a little bit elevated, and I submitted a question on one of Bart K's live streams, and even submitting the question on his live stream, I was a little bit nervous about it. And so yeah, no, I'd never imagined. Um, but I didn't even have this YouTube channel when I started. In as far as like a lot of people start their YouTube channel to be accountable. That's their way of measuring, well, this is what I looked like on day one, and this is what I look like a week later, and that kind of thing. And but I had none of that. So yeah, to be just over 3 years in and be doing this kind of thing every day is pretty it's pretty weird actually when I think back on it. You're making me think about it now.
Well, did I hear you say that you attempted to start a channel doing dad jokes?
Yes, that was yeah. I'm a big fan of dad jokes. I absolutely love dad jokes, and yeah, I thought I'm going to try my hand at making my own dad jokes. And it lasted about you know 2 minutes, and I went, oh yeah, I'm done with that. There's too much thinking involved in this. I'm over it.
Can you share one of your favorite dad jokes?
Oh, okay. Now you're putting me on the spot. Oh, no, I'll think about it
Yeah,
as
think
we're
about it.
talking, and yeah, there's so many of them, but yeah, it's like, of course, none of them's coming to mind right now, but I'll get back to you before the end of the interview.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, did not mean to put you on the spot. On my show, The Carnivortex, I always try to throw a topic or a question or something out there, just something that I've been thinking about that I thought would be interesting to talk about. And when I was thinking about interviewing you, what just kept coming up for me was that carnivore stories are irrelevant. And so I have some thoughts behind that, but what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say that to you?
Um, well, when I think about, if you are saying carnival stories are irrelevant, I mean that kind of comes across as what what the mainstream would probably think and say out loud about this kind of thing, because to the mainstream, all that's important is the evidence. And what the evidence is are the studies that tell them this is what's most likely based on the parameters we set up for the study. And whether it's their whether it's their education or just the way they think, whatever it is, they're stuck in a paradigm of I can't look at anything outside the studies. But the interesting thing is, while the interviews are not controlled, it's there's none of the constraints around what studies have. It's still evidence. It's still evidence that certainly in terms of everyone that does carnivore or keto even has the same kind of results. They improve their blood sugar, they improve all of their A1C, all of these things. And so the type of person that would say carnivore is irrelevant is the same person that would say, yeah, red meat's linked to type 2 diabetes.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that. I'm a word nerd. So I was like, okay, what does irrelevant actually mean? So just the definition, it's that somebody's thoughts or opinions, actions are not considered important. And so I
Mm.
think that when people deem these stories as irrelevant, not only are they not accepting the information, but this is such a life-changing thing for people. They're actually disregarding those people in a sense.
Right. So I think it's kind of the way a lot of people in the I'm just calling it the mainstream because that's the predominant way of thinking that's proliferated over the last few decades or whatever. So the researchers, the doctors, the scientists in the mainstream, I think if for those that do say that these kind of anecdotes are irrelevant, I think it's intellectual dishonesty because someone who's actually thinking would say, even if they're swayed by the studies, would actually say, okay, well, the studies point in this direction. But it's very interesting that everyone that eats in this particular way has similar results. There's something we need to look at here. But it's completely dismissed as this is crazy. Your cholesterol goes up. End of story. So yeah, I think that's a level of intellectual dishonesty. And I think that shows people that just dismiss it out of hand. It shows that they are not willing to entertain any kind of form of nuance, which is pretty dangerous, actually.
It is very dangerous. And I don't know, I think it's, we can err on the side of arrogance in the sense that, I mean, how much of the knowledge in the universe do we really possess? How much do we really know? I think that it's easy to think we know a lot more than we do,
Mm.
but our personal experience is very important. I mean,
Right.
what we know and all of the N of ones, I mean, that I think is really valuable.
Mm.
And so, something that I've heard you say also is that maybe a lot of stories are similar, but that doesn't make them any less powerful or valuable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if anything, it makes them more powerful because it's just that extra building block on top of the, don't want to say pyramid because that reminds me of the food pyramid, but the building block on top of this like anecdotal evidence that says there's something here. And, you know, I th there's very few people that have a death wish. And there's so if they were eating in a way that wasn't serving them, wasn't making them feel better, wasn't improving their lives, then people would stop doing it, you know? Uh, Based on the addictive nature of carbs, like when you look at something like, I don't know, granola or oatmeal or something like that, right? You eat a, certainly in my experience, I ate a bowl of that. I couldn't stop at one bowl. The first
Mhm.
thought I had when I was near the end of the bowl was, where's the next one? And I'd be like panicking if I'd had the last serving of it and I had to go out to the supermarket before I could have another one. No one's going to go, I'm going to restrict all those things that I loved eating and feel worse at the same time for the rest of my life. It makes no sense. But that's kind of the mainstream would have us believe that that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that everybody's supposed to be normal, which is what, a setting on your dryer, and healthy. I mean, what does that really mean? You know, well, thinking about that, so I want to kind of go back in your story some. So I understand that were you 17 and you suffered a stroke?
That's right, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I I was already working full time when I was 17. And so it was a Sunday night and I went to bed, 10:30 or something. And I was working the next day, so I didn't want to be up too late. Went to bed, and when I woke up on the Monday morning, I just felt weird. And my head was like, it's almost, I was 17. I already knew very well what a hangover felt like. And it felt like I had a hangover in a way. But it was like a hangover when you've got a hangover, but you're still drunk. You've had that much to drink that the hangover started, but you're all uncoordinated and all that kind of thing still. And so I got out of bed and I'm like unbalanced and that kind of thing. And what's wrong? And, you know, but I was still 17. So I think nothing hit me like there's a problem here. It was just like, oh, I've got a virus. I need to shake this off. Maybe after a shower, I'll feel better. So I just started getting ready for work, went into the shower, did all that kind of thing. And I went to work and I traveled like an hour on the train, got to work, opened up the office. And after having a stroke, opened up the office, all of this stuff. And when I was in the office, I was having trouble navigating around and I bumped into a box, almost fell over a box, all this kind of thing. And I thought, oh no, there is something wrong. And so just went, I'm going home. And I headed back to the train station and traveled an hour back to home. By the time I got home, I was dragging the right side of my body behind me. It was basically the right side of my body was just there to stabilize the left side. And yeah, so I was like living in a kind of a little flat out the back of my parents' house at that time. So it's like in Australia, you call it a granny flat. So if your grandma lives with you, she can have her independence kind of thing. So we'd bought a house at one of those. So I was living out the back of there. So as I got home, my mum saw me and she was like, okay, we need to go to the doctor. And she took me to the doctor and he examined me and he did all the stuff. He was smacking my knee with a hammer and he was doing all this kind of thing. And at this point, my face is not, the right side of my face is not working. It's kind of drooping down. And the whole right side of my body is not working. And he does all these examinations and he tells me, you've got gastro. Go home and take some Panadol and rest and all this kind of thing. And I'm like, even as a 17-year-old, I'm thinking, this is not right.
Mm.
And so we go home. I'm in bed for another few hours, and it's like, no, there's something wrong. So we go to another doctor, and he says, go to, for some reason, that part of my story always gets me upset. He just looked at me, and perhaps it's the way he looked at me. I don't know. It's just something locked away in the back of my mind. But he just looked at me and said, take him to the hospital straight away. We don't have time to wait for an ambulance. And so got rushed to hospital, and yeah, it was an aneurysm that had burst in my sleep. And I was just lucky my blood was thicker than usual, coagulated quickly, and the aneurysm got kind of clotted, and so the blood stopped rushing into my brain.
Well, thank God that he sent you. And Dave, that is so
Yeah,
scary. And I'm sure your parents were incredibly worried also.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, it's fortunately everything kind of turned out okay, and so that's 30 odd years ago now.
Wow. And so at 17, and then I think I understand you immediately picked up as soon as you could and, and went back to work and just went on with life.
Yeah, my the company I worked for at the time was really good. While I was in hospital, they said, "Look, we'll continue to pay you and all this kind of thing." I s- probably I was in hospital for a month, 2 months, or in hospital and then resting at home and all that kind of thing for a month or 2 months. But yeah, I was able to go back to work. Um, the first operation wasn't successful, so I had to go and have another operation. But that's kind of it got fixed anyway. Everything went back to normal, and I feel like I was pretty resilient, and I think I'm kind of lucky that in a way that it happened to me when I was 17, because if it happened to me now, I wouldn't have the kind of recovery that I've had.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you did have it now being carnivore, I think maybe it wouldn't have happened. Who knows? And
Right.
so going back to that, so there you are, you were already working full time at 17, then this happens and you just keep going. And you've talked about your alcohol addiction. Do you think that any part of that was just your way of dealing with that huge trauma that happened to you?
I I think probably there's part of that that made it worse. The addiction became worse because of that, because it was like a soothing thing, a kind of, but the alcohol really started because for me it was a confidence booster. I was always shy growing up, never talked to anyone, that kind of thing. And when I had my first drink of alcohol, I realized that, wow, I've got personality. And I'm able to talk to people without feeling nervous and without feeling shy and all this kind of thing. And so it became a crutch that way for me. And I think probably having the stroke probably made it worse because and after I had the stroke, I couldn't drink for a year because when you have a head operation, they put you on anti-epilepsy meds to make sure that you don't develop epilepsy, and you can't drink with those. So I think after that 1 year was over, and so I had my 18th birthday alcohol free, and so yeah, after um, that year, I just went crazy with the alcohol, I think, as well. So it's all these little things, that built up.
Yeah, and you also talked about sugar addiction. So is the sugar addiction going on at the same time as the alcohol addiction?
Yeah. And the more I talk to people, I feel like these two things are linked, like for most people, but for me, the sugar addiction's always been there, you know, without going into too many details to avoid this getting in trouble on YouTube. Um, I, I remember when I was a 10-year-old, And I would wake up early in the morning and I would sneak into the cupboards and I would just take things and like I'd take one cookie and then I'd sit down and I'd eat that cookie, like knowing that I shouldn't be doing this at, 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning or something. But my parents were asleep, of course. And so I'm eating this cookie and then I'd finish the cookie and then I'd go, still got an empty hole there. I need to go back and get another one. And so and I think I was being really clever, not doing this while everyone was asleep and thinking, if I don't take too many, they won't notice I've taken them. But I mean, I was eating probably half a packet or something at the time. But yeah, that just continued. And then, it was bread, it was everything. And I was never huge. Like I've never been obese, but I always had this like pot belly that you get when you're you're eating too much bread and you're drinking too much alcohol and that kind of thing. So the kind of the pizza lover's belly kind of thing, that hard kind of beer belly looking thing. So that was always a thing. And I was a 13, 14-year old in high school or the equivalent to junior high school, and it was prevalent then, you know.
So, yeah, I agree. And I've similarly had some instances where I would sneak and take things. I remember my parents had a bag of chocolate chips in the freezer, and I would go in and get those chocolate chips, which I'm sure over a period of time they realized, although we didn't have a lot of sweets in the house. And so that kind of thing, or, scooping sugar out of the bowl, that was another
R-
thing, or dumping half a bowl of sugar on a healthy cereal such as Raisin Bran, you know, those kind of
Right.
things. I think it's just that hit and
Yeah.
sugar, it just has such a powerful hook.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's so easy, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a time, this is when I was younger than 10 years old, but I remember a time when I was like scarfing down vitamin C tablets that my mum had bought because it had that kind of, it was ones that kind of dissolve on your tongue. So it was that kind of sugary, sour kind of vitamin C taste in there. So I was just downing these things. So I'm probably giving myself oxalate poisoning as well as who knows what else.
Oh yeah, and that's the healthiest way to get your vitamin C because we're going to be deficient now on carnivore.
Right.
Oh gosh, that yeah, your story is really interesting. And you said, you're resilient. I think almost beyond resilient because pushing through that and years. So how many years did you battle that alcohol and sugar addiction?
Oh, I mean, the sugar addiction is forever, but and the alcohol was basically, the whole time it's legal. I've legally been able to drink, and in Australia that's 18. But of course, I had that year off, so I was probably like 18 and a half, 19. And I can't, I couldn't stop. Like friends would come round and we'd have a beer together. And I think this is the addictive personality thing, is you're not even finished your beer or you're not even finished whatever the sugary thing is you're eating. And you're already thinking about where the next one's coming from, you know? And in Japan, for example, we have this thing called nomi hodai at a lot of restaurants, which is all you can drink,
Mm.
right? Wouldn't work in Australia because like people would just take advantage of this. But in Japan, they have this nomi hodai, and what the way they often do it is you can't get your new glass of whatever it is until you've completely emptied the glass you've got, right? So you can't be stacking up lots and lots of drinks. And like I would finish a glass of beer and then I'd order my next one and I'd be panicking because it's like, when is this next one coming? This is taking so long. it's really bad. But like I I did have some time where it wasn't much of an issue for me. I moved from my hometown of Melbourne, about 2 hours plane flight north to Queensland in Australia to the Gold Coast when I was about, how old would I have been then? 21. And at that time when I was living on my own, I was able to, I didn't want to drink alcohol. I was like completely on this new exploration of living on my own for the first time and, you know, getting a new job and all this kind of thing, and I was going to be healthy and that kind of thing. And I did really well. But then that job, they started sending me overseas on assignments, and they were like long-term things overseas. So like I would go to London for a year. And when you are sent overseas for a year with other people that have been sent overseas for a year and you're living in a share house with them, basically, it's like it's a free-for-all, because when you're not at home, you have less responsibility. It's all about just having fun. So you go to work, and then after work, it's just like, let's get drunk, let's eat whatever we want. And that was really the start.
So fast forward up to 2022 when you went to the doctor and they said, hey, you've got prediabetes and you have an alcohol problem. And they wanted to give you the horrible medicine. I mean, what was your thought about when you said, hey, I think I want to do this on my own and take care of it? I mean, did you really at that point know what you were going to do? You'd mentioned that keto had worked for you in the past. Was that just your initial thought, hey, I'm going to go back to keto and see what I can do?
Yeah, so my first thought was just the fear of this drug. But yeah, I thought I'd have a good chance if I was keto because ever since I first tried Atkins, like two or so decades before that, every time that I restricted carbohydrates, I always one of the most immediate improvements I had was self-control and an ability to not get so emotional about things. And so I knew that I could kind of put myself in a state of greater self-control. So that's why I thought, okay, I've got to try this first. So yeah, that was really the only way, the thing that spurred me to try that.
And so, how long into that way of eating did you realize that, hey, this is something that's not only changed my life, this has the potential to impact other people and then in turn cause you to, start forming kind of your own community in a sense online.
So I was about 4 months in. The first video I learned, so I started on, I'm not 100% sure of the date. It's about the 3rd of June in 2022. That was when keto started, and then a week or so later, then I went to carnivore. And I started my channel sometime early October, I think, of the same year. So it's about 4 months. And the reason I started it was because I was angry because I'd seen all these improvements. And because it was carnivore, more so than I'd ever experienced the times I'd done keto before. And I was just angry and feeling like we just, we've been lied to all the time. Like every time I've gone into this kind of way of eating, I've felt better. And every time someone's tried to talk me out of it, said, no, this is wrong, this is bad, whether it's media or someone close to me. And it's just not true. And I just want to say my piece as well. And so I thought I'll put out a couple of videos talking about, I don't know, what improved for me or what I've been eating and that kind of thing. And maybe I'll get 10 people watching, and most of them will be pity views from family or friends or something. But um, it just kind of took off. And the thing that made me want to continue with it is the more I talked about how it had benefited me, the more I noticed in the comments people saying, "Me too. Yeah, that happened for me as well." And so I thought, okay, well, there definitely is something to this. And so I just kept going. And the interviews started just because in a way I wanted to network more with the carnivore community because there's nothing in Japan. There's no carnivore community in Japan. And so the only way I could kind of feel more part of the community was to talk to people. And so a couple of people had offered to come on and do interviews. So I was like, that's awesome. And then I got on some live streams with people like Bart Kay, and it was just kind of snowballed from there.
Well, talking about the all the people that you're interviewing and the comments, something that I also believe I heard you say in regards to comments was really interesting. And that was if somebody asked you about the negative comments that people put out there. And to paraphrase what you said, it's sort of like, well, that's what people are thinking anyway, that's in their heads, and maybe they just have the license to put that out there. And I thought that was really interesting that, I don't know, that comments are a way for people to just, dump whatever it is that normally they would keep in their head.
Yeah, I think it is. Like, it's just like, it's the keyboard warrior thing, when people write. When I started at first, especially when I'd have a video that did really well for, whatever reason, like the YouTube gods work in weird ways. So sometimes like a video just suddenly gets a lot of views. And so I remember the first one I had, most of the comments were positive, but you would get people saying things like, well, you look old, so it's obviously not working. I'm like, it's because I am old. Like, I'm not saying this is turning me into a 20-year-old and reversing years and making me, like this Hollywood superstar or something, right? I'm saying I feel better and I'm just sharing my story. And so when I saw comments like that, I just give them a reply like, thank you. Yeah, cheers. Appreciate the feedback.
Okay, for one thing, you do not look old, and I'm not just saying that. You're not old. I think I'm probably
Thank you.
quite a bit older than you are. And that people would say things like that is just, I don't know. And there are those stories that are spectacular. I mean, you do have those people that have really healed everything, just amazing, amazing stories. But then you also have the stories of people who are feeling better day by day.
Hmm.
And I think that is just as important.
I agree. Yeah. So I actually, in some ways, I think those stories are more important because when I was younger and taking time off school and watching like one of the things that if I was sick or if it was a class I didn't want to go to and I was pretending to be sick, I would watch daytime TV in Australia. And daytime TV when I was in high school was Jerry Springer, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah, Donahue, all of this kind of stuff, right? And it was just back to back during the day. And so I'd watch all this stuff. And one of the things I noticed, and is probably more so on Oprah than the other ones, because the other ones tended to be more fighty in nature. But on the Oprah ones, like you'd have someone come on that had lost lots and lots of weight, and they'd be talking about how they did it, with this diet or this superfood or this kind of exercise, whatever it was. And, you'd look at that kind of thing and you'd think, yeah, that's good for you, but it's not going to happen for me. I've tried stuff like that before. I've tried everything. And, you would kind of look at that skeptically and think, yeah, some people are just lucky. They can lose weight really quickly or they can get healthy really quickly. It's not the same for me. And I think that the stories of people just, I feel better, I'm sleeping better, lost a bit of weight, still got some to lose, that kind of thing, is more important because people can watch that and go, yeah, that's me.
Mhm.
I probably that's how I'm going to react. And the reality is when you go carnivore, you like a lot of people do lose weight very quickly and feel better very quickly. But I think just the kind of the average Joe stories are more important because it makes it feel real for more people.
Yeah, I think people go to these videos looking for hope and also looking for an answer, which is why many people who have struggled through the years. I mean, I've tried every diet, from Weight Watchers to grapefruit, whatever, always looking at people and going, hey, oh, could I do that? Or is that me? But again, to your point, if it's somebody that, I'm watching that I could never relate to and think, well, yeah, there's no way that could ever
Yeah.
work. I mean, I think that it's very important. So, in a sense, all these irrelevant stories are actually the most powerful.
Mm.
So you work a full-time job. And can I ask what your vocation is? I've heard some things and maybe you teach, but what do you actually do in your job?
So I'm a computer programmer by trade. And what I mean by that is I'm not formally educated. I started programming when I was 10 years old, and when I was 17 realized I was pretty good at picking up different programming languages, and that's how I got a full-time job at 17. But for the last 15 years, I've been a public speaking trainer. And so I would go to large companies, often pharmaceutical companies, and help the employees to deliver more globally acceptable presentations because like Japanese people are very instrumental in their body language and the way they speak when they're presenting. So trying to kind of get them out of the shell.
So as a public speaking and making sure their content is viable, do you tell them in a pharmaceutical company, oh, you can't share what it is that your company does?
Well, the interesting thing about scientists actually is if you want to see the most boring public speakers or presenters in the world, just get a scientist to do a presentation because it's very hard to get through to a scientist that you don't have to write every single word that you're going to present on the slides. That's not going to get that's not going to keep your audience's attention. But they can't get out of that habit because they've got this kind of data mindset and they want to present all the data and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was always very difficult to get them to do good presentations.
So is that really surprising to you coming from a background where you've felt socially anxious and now your vocation is really training people how to be socially effective in a sense?
Well, that's a weird thing. It's actually having a conversation with just uh, s- having a coffee and having a conversation with a few people. It can often be more difficult for me than standing in front of 2,000 people and doing a presentation. And I think when you do public speaking enough, you get to a point where once you're standing on stage in front of people, you're able to kind of switch off the feeling of, oh my goodness, they're all judging me and all this kind of thing, because you you get to a point where you realize, well, people are going to judge you whether you want them to or not. So it doesn't really matter. Um, and yeah, so the the normal everyday interactions are probably more difficult for me than being in front of people.
Gosh, well, that would be hard for somebody to believe because you are so empathic on camera. I mean, you connect with all the people that you interview, and you're so gracious and easy to talk to. And I just think that that's just such a cool thing that I would never perceive you that way. So, how do you have the energy and the ability to do what you do? Because I think I heard you say you do 15 to 30 interviews a week and you do those before you go to work every day. Is that right?
So time zones kind of work in my favor.
Ah,
Um, so majority of my interviews are with North America or with UK, Europe. And so when it's an interview with North America, it's early morning for me. When it's Europe or the UK, it tends to be later in the evening. So it's just it's split really nicely.
yeah. So you kind of start your day out with that and then end it as well.
Yeah. And, the days are different. Some days I won't have any in the morning, some days I won't have any in the evening, that kind of thing. Other days it's more kind of stacked. But I feel like it's just something that the message needs to get out there. And it's motivational for me too. One thing I realized when I first started doing, one thing I thought when I first started doing these interviews was it's important to get the message out there. So we've got all these interviews out there so that we can get more people involved in carnivore. More people can understand it's a thing that works. But I realized maybe 9 months into doing it that it's not just that. It's good motivation for people who are already doing carnivore, including myself. So, you know, when you're having a rough day and you're feeling like, you know, I might just have that bag of cashews, or I might just have that bit of cheesecake, or, I'm feeling weaker than normal. If you can listen to someone's interview and just hear them talk about their experience on carnivore, their ups and their downs about it, that kind of thing, it can take your mind off the food, and it also kind of makes you more resolved to stick with it. And so for me, it's also a little bit of a selfish thing, because it helps me as well.
Well, I definitely love watching all of the different interviews. And yes, it's motivating, but it's also a connection because most people are not surrounded by others who are eating the same way or supportive of it. I'm blessed
Mm.
that, my husband is very supportive. He's not carnivore. Now, so is your wife supportive of carnivore for you?
She's happy for me. She can, she sees what it's done for me, but she's not on board. Partly because it's very difficult culturally in Japan to eat this way, because it would be very strange for a Japanese person to refuse rice or that kind of thing. Like in Japan, they have a saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
Mm.
Right. So basically, the more individualistic you are, the more we're going to beat up on you. So it's all about harmony and everyone being the same and all that kind of thing. So yeah, culturally, it's very difficult to change your diet like that. But also, she's a nurse, so it kind of goes against all the training she's had, that kind of thing. So, but she's happy for me.
So is that hard for you in a social setting in that culture, like going out with others? I mean, is that ever are you an oddity?
Yeah, well, yes, I am, but it's not hard for me because, well, first of all, I wear that oddity thing as a badge of honor. But in Japan, the thing is, they look at all foreigners as an oddity anyway, right? And, every foreigner is like, when you think about all the kind of English speaking countries, like the one that Japanese people are going to know best is America. And so every foreigner is basically American in a Japanese person's eyes, right? And so they'll just look at me and they'll go, "Oh, well, you're just weird. You're just a foreigner. You're just American, whatever." So they just it's like having a get out of jail free card.
So yeah, just by virtue of you not being Japanese, you're already considered different. So it doesn't really matter if you're eating something different because that's kind of expected.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's something different. Well, that's really interesting. I know my husband works for a Japanese company, and so he has made several trips to Japan.
Mm,
And yeah, kind of the same experience.
yeah. The good thing about Japan with eating, though, is it is a very meat-based society. The stereotype is Japanese people are so healthy because they eat lots and lots of plants and blah, blah, blah. And while it's true they do eat a lot of plants, they also eat a lot of meat and they eat a lot of fatty meat. You give a Japanese person a lean steak and they'll be like, what's this? So they understand that fat is an important part and for taste and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's easy to stay carnivore here.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you a question that isn't really, well, it might be an irrelevant question. And I might have already given you the answer to the question earlier in the interview, but I mean, you've done lots of podcasts and live streams and interviewed people and been interviewed. What is one question that you wish someone had asked you?
That's an interesting question. Um, wow, I'm not sure.
And if that's too hard, what's one question you wish someone had not asked you? Since I nicely put you on the spot earlier.
Um, I don't know. What's your favorite dad joke? I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, that no, I
Um,
was like, I totally gave you one. That is fair. That is more than fair.
um, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like, to be honest, I'm an open book. So yeah, I never have a problem with question. I don't think I've ever had a question and thought, oh, I don't want that. Don't ask me that. I can't answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just really appreciate everything that you're doing in the carnivore community and how you're connecting people. And I enjoy listening to all of your interviews. I enjoy listening to you and Stephen Thomas doing live streams and answering questions. I just enjoy all of that and your perspective. And I just think that there is nothing about your carnivore story or anyone's story that's irrelevant, and that you're willing to look back and share those things that were so hard when you were young and fast forward to now, and just how you're continuing to live life and learn and go forward. I just think it's really amazing. And I mean, are you planning, as far as you know, to continue interviewing and doing what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm as much as possible, I'm trying to double down and yeah, it's I love talking to people as well about carnivore, and of course, there's no one around me whose ear I can chew off about carnivore. So if I can do it through interviews, then, it's a good outlet for me.
Gosh, well, thank you. I appreciate you so much coming on here. And my apologies for the high fat cats who decided to be a little boisterous. They have been hyper focusing on circadian rhythms lately and not appearing, but evidently right now is, I think it's getting close to dinner time and they're not pleased that this is the time that I'm choosing to do a video. So I apologize for the noise on there, but thank you again, Dave. And hey, if anybody doesn't know, please tell everyone where they can find you.
Sure. So they can find me on YouTube. They can search No Carb Life or at Zero Carb, and I'll come up with either of those searches.
Okay, and I will put links to that in the show notes. But yes, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much, Barb. I really appreciate having me on.